Hi, this is TV Smith. We're celebrating 50 years of my band, The Adverts, this year in Australia, and you're listening to Nate on the Vinyl Guide.
Welcome to The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. Here's your host, the biggest record nerd of them all, Nate Goyer.
Hey everyone, it's Nate. Welcome to episode 541 of The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. And dear people, this week we are welcoming to the show punk pioneer and absolute dead set legend, Mr. TV Smith. And we're going to discuss the history and records and rare recordings of the Adverts, as well as his solo career. Now, if you're not familiar with the Adverts, well, actually, yes, you are, because the Adverts' early catalog is truly it's woven into the fabric of the foundations of punk and modern music. I mean, you've heard them. Songs like Gary Gilmore's Eyes, One Chord Wonders, No Time to Be 21, Great British Mistake, all those tracks and more. The Adverts were very short-lived, but hugely pivotal. Very influential band. The flame burned hot and bright, but only for a short time. But the legacy of the music we still have today. And we have frontman TV Smith, who continues to write and record and tour. Now, TV Smith is in Australia the first few weeks of April, and as an amazing bonus, he's being backed by the Hard-Ons. Ray, Blackie, and Murray are going to be his backing band, which is going to make this tour friggin' amazing. Certainly one you don't want to miss. tvsmith.co.uk. That Aussie tour is in April, then a shitload of gigs in Europe after that. But the Hard-Ons are backing him only for the Australian dates. So if you're an Aussie, do not miss these shows. And real quick, before we start, a shameful plug for my Patreon page, patreon.com/vinylguide. I'm not taking sponsors anymore. These episodes you've been listening to for quite some time are all commercial free, except for the one I'm giving you right now for my patreon.com/vinylguide support page. Help support the show there. A few dollar bills every month is certainly appreciated and actually puts you in the running to win my eternal love. So that's patreon.com/vinylguide. Go there now, help support the show, and you may get the chance to draw me like one of your French girls, Jack. Alrighty, enough of the jibber jabber. Let's get into the conversation with Mr. TV Smith on 50 years of the Adverts. Well, TV Smith, we are very excited to see you coming to Australia. I want to remind people, first half of April, you're making your way through Victoria, Frankston, Collingwood, Geelong. Then you're coming up Newcastle Way, Woy Woy. I'm going to see you at Woy Woy. That's a fantastic club. That is going to be fun. Then you're going to be in Sydney at the Lansdowne, which is one of my favorite pubs in the CBD, and then in Wollongong. So I'm going to put a link to tickets for those shows. I think they're going to sell out really quick. So you excited about coming back to Australia?
Yeah, I'm really excited, and with the added bonus of having the Hard-Ons backing me up, it's going to really, I think they're going to be great shows.
They are fantastic. By the way, I heard them play Gary Gilmore's Eyes this weekend at a gig, and they are on fire. It's
fantastic.
They are excited about this. So yeah, very stoked. So the material that you'll be doing on this tour, I mean, obviously there's Adverts, but your solo catalog just spans decades. And, are you going to be focusing on Adverts, or is it going to be from throughout your career, the set list?
Well, this time we're going to do Adverts because it is the 50th, anniversary of the band. So we're going to kind of like do an Advert celebration really and do all Advert songs. And it's a great opportunity to get those songs out again, with a really solid backing band who know how to handle them. They're not the easiest songs in the world to play. A lot of people approach the Advert songs and think they're just going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 and 3 chords, because of the cliche of One Chord Wonders, the name. But actually, the songs are really complex, because I wrote them. I didn't know anything about music. I didn't know anything about writing songs. So they kind of go to unexpected places and have weird sort of tempo changes, really just because I didn't know how to write a song. So I just did whatever felt right, and that's kind of their I think that's their charm.
That's funny you say that, because Ray just talked to me this weekend, and he was telling me how different it was. Like, you think of those early punk songs and you just think, playing with a similar energy as like the Ramones. He said, but Adverts is way different. They're having to, really approach them differently, which I think is a fun challenge for them.
Yeah, you have to kind of rethink how you play because, you get used to playing in certain ways and you get used to thinking, oh, well, after this chord, it's going to be this chord. And then what? It's not that chord, it's this other one. And it's kind of, as a player, it's weird. As a consumer, music, you don't even kind of notice it. But when you get down to actually playing those songs and working them out, how they work, you find out that there's all kind of stuff going on in there that you don't expect.
Yeah. So here we are 50 years later. I mean, does it kind of trip you out a little bit? What are your thoughts about us still celebrating this music that you did so early in your lifetime?
Well, I do find it, a bit odd, but, I find it odd to be nearly 70 years old. I mean, life is odd. Let's face it. I certainly didn't think, when I was like, playing in the Adverts in 1977 that I would still be, a musician even when I was, I thought anyone over 50 was like dead.
Over 30.
Exactly. Yeah. Over 25. But it's a joy, to still be here and still be able to do it and to find that the songs have stood the test of time, because you write them and they're what you feel, there's nothing fake in them. They're all authentic. And to realize that kind of stuff does last is really kind of like, it's kind of heartwarming, really, to be able to go on stage and mean every word still is kind of odd, but it's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'd love to get into some of these records because we talk a lot about records here on the show. And do you still play vinyl records, or you gotten rid of most of them now?
Well, I did get rid of most of them, and but there was such a demand for vinyl coming back that I started to make, obviously started making my own stuff back on vinyl again because people wanted it. So then I got myself a vinyl set up because I needed to check the vinyl that I was making myself, and then I kind of realized again how nice vinyl is. What a nice sound it is to hear things on vinyl, not CD. So yeah, I've got a vinyl set up again now. Having said that, I don't have much time to listen to records myself.
Yeah, that's always the bane of the existence. When you when you're young, you have plenty of time, but not enough records. And as you get older, you got plenty of records, not enough time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I used to love, just really locking into a new record when I was a kid. You get a new one, you'd be all excited, and you'd listen to it. You'd really listen.
Mm-hmm.
But now I feel my role is really to make the records that other people can really listen to and get something out of. And if I have a break from touring, what I do now is I write or I record rather than listen to stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, what were some of the records that influenced you early on, prior to starting the band?
Well, I was a big Bowie fan. The kind of stranger end of glam rock inspired me a lot. The first few Roxy Music albums, all the Bowie albums, I thought were fabulous. There were other kind of odd glam bands in England, like Cockney Rebel, who I found very interesting. And right across the spectrum, really, Marley, I loved all the Wailers stuff. Got into quite a lot of reggae around punk time. But I grew up with the Beatles and the Stones, like all kids did, and what was in the charts, pop music. It was kind of the failure of pop music that made me want to write myself, really, because I love pop songs. I love the fact they had choruses and melodies and you could sing along with them. But the words, it was like, I don't want to sing along to that. I could, but it's kind of below me to sing along with these rubbish choruses. So, that made me want to write songs that you could sing along to, and they had some meaning in them.
Yeah, very early on, your standards were high. Was there an artist? Because I would imagine, being a youngling, you'd see these artists, Beatles, Stones, and Bowie, but perhaps not seeing a path for yourself. Was there an artist that kind of the penny dropped where you're like, you know what, I could do that. I could see myself doing that.
Well, the only one that really, the whole game changed with the Sex Pistols, really, because up until that point, well, I suppose I saw bands like the Heavy Metal Kids in little clubs, and there was, when I look back at it, there was kind of 15 people there, and I thought, well, actually, and you'd meet them afterwards, and they seemed kind of disappointing. You didn't know why, I kind of understood that feel. I understand that feeling now, but generally, music back then, it was us and them. You were in the audience, and there was no way to cross that barrier to get on the stage yourself and be part of it. And I had a band myself called Sleaze, before the Adverts, and we were outside of the whole music industry. There was no way we could get a record deal or we could have proper gigs. We were booking sort of scout huts and town halls and things and putting our own gigs on, but there was no way we were part of the real record business. But with when I saw the Sex Pistols, that was suddenly a different thing. These kids on stage were the same as us,
right?
And that was something I could aspire to. And the Roxy Club opened, and suddenly we were right in. There was no us and them between the audience and the musicians. Anyone who wanted to get up on there and do it and had the ideas could do it.
Yeah. It seems like, looking back on it now, I'm sure it's different while you're in it, but looking back on it now, it seems like it was like a small community. Like everyone kind of knew each other. Is that kind of the right interpretation, or am I?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was a very small community because it was a new thing, and it grew very rapidly. But I guess, the first time we went down to the Roxy Club, there's probably, 30 people who all knew each other. Often the gigs at the Roxy in the January of 77, the Adverts played twice there in January 77. They weren't that many people. Even when it was crowded, there was only 100 people, when it's full. And often it wasn't full, or early on in the evenings it wasn't full. And so, yeah, it was a very small community for the first few weeks or months.
Now, which came first, that first Advert single on Stiff or the Roxy compilation LP?
The first Advert single, One Called Wonders, came first.
Okay, all right.
We were literally down playing at the Roxy Club in January or February, I think, and Brian James from The Damned, who were already on Stiff Records, said to Jake and Dave at Stiff that there was this band he thought were good playing down the Roxy, and they came down to see us. And came as literally, it was like a cliche, really. Came after the gig and came up to us and said, "We want to put your record out."
Oh,
and that was it. We went round to the Stiff offices, a couple of days later, and signed a very flimsy contract for a single, and and that was the start of things.
Okay, all right. What do you remember about recording that single?
Stiff used a little studio called Pathway in North London, which was so small that actually the recording room was downstairs, and then you had to go up like a step ladder to get to the mixing room, which was on the next floor up. It seemed to be kind of installed in a normal someone's house, really, and we did it very fast. If you listen to the end of the B-side of One Called Wonders, Quick Step, you can hear Laurie, the drummer, at the end say, "Oh, my cymbals fell off." It was like we didn't have time for another take. So,
so it was just like an afternoon. It was just like an afternoon.
It was an afternoon. Yeah, we got it down in an afternoon. And, Larry Wallace was an experienced musician from the Pink Fairies. He produced it and, managed to, because we recorded fast and he mixed fast, we kept the excitement. And I think that's a great way to record. I still think that's a great way to record. Don't get bogged down. Get it down while it's fresh and you're all excited about it. I think bands spend too long in studios and they lose their own enthusiasm somehow by focusing too much on the detail.
Capturing the moment is perhaps the most important thing there. So there was a label change for the Gary Gilmore's Eyes single. Was that ever considered to be a Stiff product, or was that never a discussion?
No, it wasn't written at the time. We did do another kind of a test recording for Stiff, which is the one that Rollins has recently found and put out as a single, which was We Who Wait and New Boys. I didn't personally think we recorded it as well as we did One Called Wonders. I didn't think it had the same freshness, so I kind of sat on that for a bit. And in the meantime, we got a manager, Michael Dempsey, who was really just a friend. He was a book publisher who wanted to help us out and save us from the sharks, really, who were circling by that time. And he thought Stiff was really ripping us off, because we weren't getting anything. We weren't getting paid from them or anything, or getting any royalties. And they were in line to do another single, but Michael considered that we were always going to be second rung to the Damned, and it was true. They were focusing all their attention. They had their punk band, which was the Damned, and we were always going to be like the support act. So he was looking around for a label that could really focus on us and give us what we needed. And then by that time, I'd written Gary Gilmore's Eyes, and it was pretty obvious that was going to be the single, the next single. And Anchor Records loved it and signed us up on that basis.
And the first single, One Chord Wonder, was actually
One Called Wonders. Actually, One Called Wonders, but
yeah.
Stiff spelt it wrong on the cover.
Oh. Yeah, there seemed to be a lot of potential issues with the cover around the time.
Well, that was the thing. Not only did they spell it wrong, which I now think was probably deliberate, but they put Just Gay's face on the front, and I think they were actually, in typical Stiff style, tried to promote the single as if it was gay advert and some kind of backing band, which was a kind of bit of bone of a contention, I've got to say.
What's interesting is the Safety in Numbers single on the back doesn't have a picture of Gay, just has a picture of her bass guitar. I don't know, was that a response to that initial?
Yeah, that was a response, yeah. We were all kind of annoyed with it. Gay was annoyed with it as well, at the way that she was taken to be the kind of the figurehead of the band, and she didn't like it. She didn't like the attention. And so for us, it was a joke to, for Safety in Numbers to have the pictures of everyone else, but not her.
It's funny because as a youngling, I remember the death of Gary Gilmore. I was brought up in the States, and I remember it was like front page news for a few days because he died by firing squad, if I recall, and there was a big controversy about whether that was humane or not. But I didn't realize that his organs were donated, and that's why the song. So I guess that topic was also front page news in the UK as well. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I didn't see why. I didn't know why we were getting fed all this stuff. It seemed a very poor taste, that such attention was being given to it. It's like they were really, he was a sad case, really. He was a real loser. And I didn't like the way it was being exploited, this story, for the sale of newspapers. And so really I decided to take the story and just make it even more bad taste than they were doing. It was more kind of, for me, it felt like I was trying to satirize the media approach to it, and if there's, and punk rock was a time when you had to step up the mark and make a 6 song, well, I'm your man.
Was this around the time Sex Pistols and Bill Grundy, to where all of a sudden there's a lot of sensationalism around punk rock? Yeah,
it was all around that kind of time. I think the Bill Grundy thing happened a little bit earlier. I'm not can't quite recall the time frame, but it really showed how how safe and conservative Britain was at the time, when people could get so shocked by a bit of swearing on mainstream television, and it's like they and so hypocritical, that on one hand the papers could be exploiting this sad story. The thing about Gilmour was he wanted to turn his life around, at the last moment, and by donating his eyes, he was actually saying, I'm finally going to do something good with my miserable life. So to exploit that story with splash headlines, and on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's so awful. These boys are swearing on television. It really exposed the hypocrisy in British society, and and the more people got offended, the more punk sort of felt compelled to be offensive. It was one of those things. We're going to break down the way the way culture is in Britain, and we're going to the more you complain, the more we're going to do it, because when you have a revolution of some kind, a cultural revolution or a musical revolution, you have to sweep away everything that was there before, at least temporarily.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, and being provocative is actually a very effective way to get the point across, or at least to get the attention on the art. Were there any attempts to censor Gary Gilmour's eyes at all? Do you recall anything like that?
The BBC weren't happy about having it on Top of the Pops, which was I guess you might know it was the mainstream chart television program that was on once a week, and everybody in Britain grew up with it. We'd be glued to our televisions to watch the half hour of what was coming into the charts, and what was going up in the charts, what was going down, and they were compelled to if a new entry went high enough in the charts, they were compelled to put you in the show, which obviously they were very
reluctant
to do with Gary Gilmour's eyes. And coincidentally, there was a cricketer in Britain at the time called Gary Gilmour, spelt differently, so M-O-U-R rather than M-O-R-E. And when the closing titles came and the adverts, Gary Gilmour's eyes came up in the chart rundown, they showed a picture of the cricketer.
That was someone covering their ass. Oh, that's funny. What were some of the early indicators that this song was totally taking off?
Well, I guess immediately. Somehow we just hit the timing right, and immediately we got the sales. Anchor Records told us it was selling. It was flying out the shops, and it did look like it was going to be a chart record.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't hang around long at the charts. It was there a few weeks, going up and down for a bit, and after we played Top of the Pops, that was a surefire way for everyone who played Top of the Pops. The next week, their record went shooting further up the charts. We played Top of the Pops, and the next week it went down a place.
No.
But we made our mark, and people still remember that and remember the adverts for that record now. So I can't complain. I don't think it was the most typical adverts record, but it hit a nerve, and for its kind of novelty value, I think we'll always be remembered for that.
Well, it's so catchy too, TV. It's one of these things. Even hearing it the other night, it's like at the end of this night, I'm like, it's still rattling around the head. Yeah. So when you guys start doing the album, Crossing the Red Sea, I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, that was recorded at Abbey Road, which I think is decidedly different than where you recorded the original singles. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was great because we got a chance to do it right. We got a chance to, to step up and get what all the other bands had with the production values the other bands had. We had a great producer. We were looking around for producers, and there was, the short list was quite long. We considered the guy who produced Blondie's first album, whose name escapes me at the moment, Martin Rushent, who did the Stranglers, quite a few people were on the list, and I'd always really respected John Leckie because I loved the Doctors of Madness, who were another sort of proto-punk glam band around at the time. And they were also well known for being fairly chaotic and on stage and not being the greatest musicians. Well, actually, they were perfectly great musicians, I thought. And John Leckie produced their album, made them sound fantastic. So I thought, well, if he can do it for the Doctors of Madness, I bet he could do it for us too. So that was the idea of choosing John, who then went on to produce many great bands like the Stone Roses. So yeah, we had Abbey Road, we had a great producer, and the band had to step up to the mark, and I think we really did.
Oh, absolutely. Now, that was on Bright Records. Are Bright and Anchor related at all, or did you move labels for that?
Well, what happened was Anchor was a subsidiary of American giants ABC, and ABC decided they didn't like this punk thing.
Oh.
So they basically closed down Anchor Records and left us without a label after Gary Gilmore's Eyes came out. So there we were floating around bizarrely, while other bands were having label and promotion. We didn't have a label. We were out on the road, and suddenly our label disappeared. So what happened was the publisher for Anchor decided he would start a label, which he called Bright, just literally to release that record. So, this was a guy without any real experience of running a label, but we had a record and we didn't have anyone to put it out with. So that's how the Bright Records thing came about.
Oh, that's interesting, because you've got this hit, you were on top of the pops and everything, and then all of a sudden your label just up sticks and left. I would have thought that you would have been courted by a lot of different people at that point for the potential. But that wasn't the case.
Well, I think it was somehow tied in. It's kind of, I can't remember exactly what happened now, to be honest, but I think we were tied in some way by I think Anchor had already paid for the album or something, and the publisher was involved. So we were kind of tied in with him. I'm not sure we could put it out on the open market sort of thing. I think we had the record already kind of in the bag when ABC withdrew their funding and closed the label down. So we were tied into a kind of amateur label, really, which I don't think they really knew what to do to promote the record, which probably explains why it kind of spent 1 week in the charts and then disappeared.
It's such a great record, but that also explains why the next record was on RCA.
Yeah, we'd had to look around for a major label after that, and it's kind of bizarre because we just didn't get the interest that other bands were getting, and it took a long time to find the deal with RCA. And we thought, well, here we go. This is great. Now we're on a major label. We can really do, we can really go places now. But actually, we were signed to the product manager at RCA, not by the A&R guy. And that caused a lot of internal rift in RCA itself. And within a few weeks of us signing, the product manager was sacked. And the A&R guys were very unhappy with us because they weren't approached to sign us. So we were basically on a label that didn't like us and didn't want us on them. And I remember once phoning up RCA and said, "Oh, I'm a journalist. I'm just trying to find out about your band called the Adverts." And RCA said, "We don't have a band called the Adverts."
Oh boy! Well, you guys, you don't strike me. At least the stories I heard, you guys don't strike me as a difficult band, and you had solid songs. It just seems to be must have just a string of mishaps and bad luck.
Yeah, it seems that way. I mean, I don't know. I mean, RCA certainly didn't see the potential of Cast of Thousands, but then the second Adverts album. But then very few people did at the time. We were very much out on a limb. we'd done Crossing the Red Sea, and I didn't want to make Crossing the Red Sea Part 2, because I thought, well, this album is actually perfect as a standalone kind of album. And we weren't the Ramones, doing, okay, here's the next record exactly the same as the last record. The whole point for me of punk rock was to, find a challenge and go for it and make something different. But it didn't fit in with the times. And RCA tried to cast us as some kind of glam band. They forced this awful cover of the record onto us, where we were sort of all misty-eyed and bathed in colours and gazing into space, which was one of the worst covers in music history.
It was more fitting of Slade than the Adverts.
We've done the best of something. We made the worst cover in the world. So yes, it was the start of quite an unfortunate run of luck for me and for the band.
Well, and just following your career and knowing what I know, you've always seemed to be someone who's ready for change and evolution anyway. So I would have imagined you approached that more as an opportunity rather than an issue, informing kind of what's next. I mean, if you move through the Adverts material, you can see this tremendous amount of growth from the first single to the last song of the second album, and then you just kept going. Is that a fair analysis, eh?
Well, I couldn't stop. I mean, by then I realized that's what I want to do, and if I look in my old song notebooks now, and the stuff for the Explorers is all kind of mixed up. The notes for the songs are very much mixed up with the final songs for the Adverts. So by the time it became clear that the Adverts couldn't go on any longer, I was already ready to start the next band, and I started straight away. I always already had a kind of idea of what I wanted for it. Having started being more experimental, as it happened, my friends who already mentioned the Doctors of Madness had just split up. So their bass player, who I considered one of the best players in Britain, was available. So I grabbed him as fast as I could and built the rest of the band together. And we were in rehearsal within a few weeks of the Adverts officially breaking up.
Mm-hmm. And that first single that you had, Missile, what was it?
Tomahawk Cruise.
Tomahawk Cruise, yeah. Tomahawk Cruise, that was, again, another quite substantial hit. Right?
Yeah, it was a mini hit. Yeah, it was only confounded by the fact that the record company didn't expect it to be a hit, so they didn't press enough records, and so we sold out of records, and which didn't have enough to actually kind of get it into a substantial chart position.
Yeah. In your career, have you held on to a lot of those records, like test pressings and things like that? The sort of collectibles of your career?
I'm not really a collector, to be honest. I have a few things. Obviously, I think I've got test pressing of Tomahawk Cruise, actually, but I'm not a big collector. You look back now and you think, somehow at the time you don't realize the value of them, but then that's why they become collectibles. I've often wished I'd kept sort of 20 of everything.
Sure. Well, I'm sure Henry's probably already talked to you about those. So ask these questions maybe years ago.
I'm sure he's got a lot more than I have.
Yeah. There's so many bootlegs, so many rehearsal tapes, and we still see some products coming out here and there. Even this thing that Henry put out, the single. You're aware of the existence of things like that, but a lot of these other bootlegs and rehearsral tapes, are these things you were familiar with, or do sometimes these releases surprise you?
Some of them have surprised me. I have no idea what's out there now. It's been a constant sort of string of like dodgy tapes from live gigs and things, and yeah, to be honest, I don't really care. I've always thought that bootlegs are, kind of stimulate music rather than no one's going to buy a bootleg and then say, I'm not buying the real record. If people are interested in these sort of badly recorded live gigs because they're a bit of history and a bit of nostalgia, to be honest, it's fine by me. The more the merrier.
Mm-hmm. Do you know where any of the master tapes of some of these recordings are? Do you know where? Do you have access to those?
No. Okay. No, everything's disappeared.
Lost to time.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Because those, again, just very curious is in terms of, where some of those artifacts are these days.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's the thing about recording with major labels. It goes into some vault somewhere, and and you never find them again. I would love to. I would love. Although, I don't want to change anything they've already done, because I think pieces, their original mix, it's how it was meant to be at the time, and with its failings and maybe you can think, well, I'd love to do that again. I'd love to remix Cast of Thousands, but actually, the sound that you make, because of the circumstances of the time, and because it's not perfect, in a way, that's its beauty. And I don't like the idea of tinkering around with things afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah, I enjoy it when an artist takes another look at their material, as long as they keep the old version in circulation as well.
Sure.
Sure.
Cast of Thousands had a really bad rep because of its bad mix, for example. But what was wrong with it was mainly a bad mastering job, which we redid for a re-release. And with a proper mastering, the whole sparkle came back to that record. You didn't need, the guitars putting up and something else taken down and all that stuff. All it needed was to be remastered. And, I think you should preserve, your intention of how you wanted to have it come out in the first place, and not revising. So,
well, I'm curious as to, when you're doing Crossing the Red Sea, Gary Gilmore's Eyes was not that long prior, but it didn't appear on the album. Was there any discussion of that single on the album, or were you guys keen to move away from that?
Well, I think it's probably my decision not to have it on, because I was thinking, well, everybody's got the single already. We won't put it on the album. It's like a stupid commercial move. You obviously put your hit single on the album. But in some ways, the record didn't fit with the rest. The Crossing the Red Sea tells a different story, and Gary Gilmore was very much a one-off. So if something had to go, to me, it was going to be that. And of course, you're talking about 35 minutes of music on vinyl back in those days, before the sound starts to degrade. So something had to go, and it was only later, when CDs came in, or you could squeeze a bit more onto vinyl, that Gilmore came back as an extra track. The same with New Day Dawning. I think that was a great song, and that fitted in with the whole ethos of Crossing the Red Sea, but that couldn't go on either.
Right. And you've started to remaster many parts of your career, including Channel 5. Which I think just came out as well. So that's something that has been remastered and expanded a bit. So, I'm
very, very happy with that, because that always suffered from really bad pressing on vinyl, and I had no idea where the master tapes were, and the version that went out onto CD literally had the pops and clicks taken out manually, and it still suffered the distortion from when the needle got into the center of the record. The CD was taken from vinyl, so it had all those problems on it. And I talked with the label I work with over here, called Easy Action, quite a lot, and they expressed a desire to put a decent version out, and we didn't have the master tape. And then, for some reason, I don't know why I never thought of it before, I got hold of the producer, Phil Brown, and he had a safety copy on tape at home. So, wow, that was an absolute, I thought, why on earth didn't I ask him before? So we finally have a pristine copy of Channel 5, which we got remastered very well by the guy who's been remastering my latest solo stuff.
Excellent. And now, when people in Australia go to see you in April, will there be copies of that, or handwriting, or even the Bored Teenagers? Will that be on vinyl on the merch table?
I'm going to certainly try and bring a lot of vinyl with me, as much as you see me with a stoop back from my carrying my suitcase when when I get there.
Hopefully it'll get lighter and lighter as the gigs go on.
That's what I'm hoping. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I'm going to try and bring over some stuff. I'd really love people to hear the newest stuff, and particularly handwriting. I want to, I'm really, really proud of that record, and so I'm going to definitely have that on the merch table.
Okay, great. What are the odds we'll see a few acoustic sets while you're down under?
This time, that's not going to happen because we're really, obviously we're all thrilled about the Hard-Ons connection, so that's what we're going to be concentrating on. I'm not going to rule out coming back and maybe playing some acoustic sets another time, but for right now, 50th year Adverts anniversary, and that's what we're going to go for 100%.
We are very much looking forward to having you here. All right, I'm going to put links in this episode page for people to get their tickets, and the spots you're playing are very cozy, let's just say. So tickets will go very quick, so I want to make sure people get the jump on those. Again, if you're in Victoria, Melbourne, Frankston, Collingwood, Geelong, then up in Newcastle, Central Coast, of course, Sydney CBD and Wollongong. Tickets can be had at TV Smith. I will put that link in this episode page. And TV Smith backed by the Hard-Ons, that's going to be one of the best tours of this year. I could feel it already in these spots. And mate, we can't wait to hear these songs, especially with that freight train of a band behind you, man.
Nice one, mate. Thank you.
Yep, that is going to be an amazing tour. TV Smith backed by the Hard-Ons, and I'm familiar with a lot of these clubs they're playing. These are going to be shows you don't want to miss. I'm going to be at the Woy Woy Lincoln Pin. If you go there, let's have a beer and enjoy TV Smith, 50 years of the Adverts, with Ray, Blackie, and Murray of Hard-Ons helping power the show. And that's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks to everyone who's sharing these episodes on social media, leaving us positive reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. That's hugely appreciated. And of course, those of you who are helping support the show via patreon.com/Vinyl Guide. Well, that sort of love engorges me to no end. We'll be back shortly with a brand new episode. So until we talk next time, you all behave yourselves. And thanks again for listening to the Vinyl Guide podcast. Cheers.